There were Democrats in our scorecard, Danielle, who actually scored higher than some of these Republicans. And,
We
but I was
we predicted that, didn't we?
we absolutely did. We absolutely predicted it. So I want everybody to go look at the scorecards. We just want you to know that they were calculated based on the numbers, where we thought the weight should be, based on their adherence to constitutional principles and how they voted, and on whether or not they were looking out on critically important things for your interest consistently. And we tried to give credit where credit was due, but we had to deduct where that was appropriate also. And it is what it is. If you go over to the Senate side, Danielle, we had some very good ones. As you might imagine, Blake Miguez did quite well. Valerie Hodges scored very well, and there were several others who did well. But there were a lot of senators who did very poorly.
How did
also,
Senator Comrade Miller do, Chris?
Comrade Miller was among the lowest of anybody in the Senate or in the House. I know he was an F.
Wow.
And well deserved.
Yeah, it was well deserved.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom. I'm Danielle Walker, along with my fearless and ferocious co-host, Chris Alexander. It's good to be back with you after a refreshing week away from the screens. I was in Oregon visiting family. Chris, what did you do?
Well, we just spent time with family. We spent some time up in St. Francisville. And I spent a good bit of time running around with my 12-year-old boy. And let me tell you what, there's never boredom when you're hanging out with a 12-year-old boy. That's for sure.
No, that's true. That's true. Especially yours. He's a very special kid. Love that guy.
Yeah, he's a good kid.
Well, I want to make sure to announce that we're proud to be streaming now on Voice of the People USA Radio and TV network, which is a growing platform that's reaching about 6 million viewers and listeners every week right now. We'll have more updates on that in the days ahead, but we will definitely be expanding and have been expanding as a result of this partnership. We're super excited about that. And look, we're here with you today. A lot of fallout from this legislative session, Chris. People are really starting to feel the heat now that they're getting back home and not able to hide out in the steakhouses of Baton Rouge, apparently.
I'll tell you what, Danielle, these are crazy times we live in. But I'll tell you, I've never seen citizens more engaged than they are right now. Because
they're not engaged in a happy way, I tell you that.
They're not engaged in a happy way at all. But I think that the days of Republican legislators being able to pull the wool over the eyes of constituents are over. And I think we owe a big debt of gratitude to President Trump for that. So much of the transparency that we see now, so much of the accountability, and so much of the citizen engagement that we see is because President Trump just ripped the scab off the wound. And everybody sees it now.
Yeah, it's true. And today, I think, it's more than fair to say that the big looming topic across the state is this eminent domain of carbon capture. And so we have some updates on that and, including some serious challenges to local sovereignty, along with some fallout from some of the other topics that were high on our agenda. So before we get into all that today, why don't I read the scripture of the day, get our heads on right, get our hearts right. Today's scripture reading is from Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 1 through 6, and it's the vision of the valley of dry bones. It says, "The hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me down in the middle of the valley, and it was full of bones. He caused me to pass among them round about, and behold, there were very many on the surface of the valley, and lo, they were very dry. He said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Lord God, you know. Again he said to me, Prophesy over these bones and say to them, Bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God to these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter you that you may come to life. I will put sinews on you, make flesh grow back on you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you that you may come alive. And you will know that I am the Lord." And, we all have times where we feel like our bones are dry and we're in need of fresh life. And we can look at circumstances in our lives and in the world around us that are so bleak and so desolate. It may seem that they're impossible to restore, but the Lord is the one who can breathe restoration, revival, and refreshing into our lives and into our souls, into our bodies. And he can do the same thing for circumstances and relationships and our communities and our nation. Nothing is impossible for the God of all creation. If he made it, he can fix it. If this dry bones picture resonates with you today, this morning especially, in the name of let me prophesy over you as Ezekiel did over the valley of dry bones. And I'll just say, in the name of Jesus, you and your life, your relationships, your desolate circumstances will come back to life. I speak restoration, revival, and turnaround. I speak the fresh breath of God into your body, your soul, your life, your circumstances, and our nation in the name of Jesus.
Amen. Amen. You know, Danielle, the devil hates the idea of God being able to touch our hearts and our minds and our lives with his grace. The devil hates it, and he will put whatever he can possibly put into our minds and into our hearts to serve as an impediment to God's grace and as an impediment to a deep understanding and knowledge of God's love. Any lie he has to try to tell us to keep us separate from God. And I really believe that that is why many people, and at times in my life, myself included, probably you included, have operated and existed as dry bones, because the devil, he is so subtle and so deceitful, and yet in many ways so powerful in being able to get us to believe lies, things that I'm never going to be good enough. I've done too many bad things. If God really knew the things that I've done in my life, or the mistakes that I've made, or the things that I'm ashamed of, there's no way I can be loved. There's no way I can be loved or accepted or forgiven or cleansed. No way. And that is what the devil wants us to walk around burdened by every single day. And that is why it is such a powerful thing to be able to accept what you just said this morning. You know, that God can restore the dry bones. And there's a part in the scripture somewhere where one of the prophets says, "I thank you, O Lord, for the bones that you have crushed rejoice once again."
Mm,
And the Lord can impose, cathartic afflictions on us as well, because we need them for humbling, and we need them in order to grow closer to him. But his redemptive power is always at hand, and we just have to remember it. It's just overwhelming to accept the towering love and mercy that God has for us. And really, it's only grace that allows us to accept it. I think it's beyond our ability to understand that measure of love rationally. In fact, I think if God were to reveal to each of us the magnificent power of his love all at one time, I think it would be maybe too much for us to handle,
yeah.
because it's just so powerful. I think I'm going to walk through the rest of the day today, really fed by your scripture this morning, that the dry bones that we have, our very lives, can always be restored by the touch of God's grace, always,
Yeah.
and by his love. And that there's nothing, if there's anything that I want our listeners to understand today, there is nothing that is beyond the forgiveness, the cleansing, and the power of our gracious Lord. Nothing.
Amen. Amen. Well, that'll get us into our right headspace, Chris.
Yeah. Let's,
We
yeah, hopefully.
Well, yeah, hopefully is right. We'll do our best to stay on track, folks. There's plenty to be angry about, so it's good to start out with some refreshing.
Well, and righteous anger is consistent with cheerful. We're cheerful warriors, Danielle. Let's remember that. Cheerful warriors.
That's right. And you have met a lot of cheerful warriors over the last couple of weeks since session has been out, Chris. I know you've been meeting with groups all over the state. You came down here to Terrebonne and met with our Bayou group. think you've been to where else? Lafayette. Tell me where all you've been.
Been to Lafayette for two different groups over there. I've been to Terrebonne. I've been to Allen Parish as recently as last night to speak to about 125 or 130 local citizens who are outraged about what's going on with the carbon capture sequestration there. And we will get into that. And I've spoken twice to groups right here in Baton Rouge. And if there's one theme, Danielle, if there's one theme that runs through all of these groups, it is that they are engaged, they understand what's going on, and they are not afraid to call out their representatives and their legislators. And I would take some humble credit along with a lot of other groups, because I think LaCag and the State of Freedom have truly empowered people to step up and to unapologetically assert their rights and their liberties and their freedoms. And it's so refreshing to see. And despite all the things we see around us, Danielle, that are wrong, and the things that we think are maybe can't be fixed or whatever, there's great optimism. There is great optimism among the people, because they understand that the more unified we are as a citizenry, the stronger we will be. And I don't think that there's any force of opposition that ultimately can prevail over a united citizenry dedicated to a common cause. I just don't believe it.
Yeah, you're right. As you're talking, I just got this visual, and I think we might need to make some LaCag and State of Freedom branded apparel that says "Make pitchforks great again." You think about these folks who, the legislators have been busy in a lot of ways bowing to industry, bowing to other pressure mechanisms like the governor. And now they got to go home, and, the chickens have come home to roost on them in a lot of ways, right?
Danielle, perfect. When you said now they got to go home, there was a representative last night who told me that Chris. He just reminded me that there were a couple of reps who were not present at this meeting with 150 people present last night to talk about the carbon capture sequestration in Allen Parish. And he said, Chris, he goes, a lot of them just do not want to go home and face their constituents. They don't want to go home, which is why so and so's not here. They just don't want to go face their constituents, which is really a common theme, I think, among politicians. They want to be around people who flatter them, who listen to them, who extol them, who compliment them and feed their ego. They don't want to be around constituents who are angry because they know how they voted, and they're starting to understand more and more that the way they are acting and the way they are legislating is very different from what they're telling their constituents. And again, I think that we have played a part in bridging that gap and making sure that citizens understand what's really going on.
Yeah. And if they have any recollection of some pain from perhaps missing a curfew or something like that, from their teenage years, I think this is the pain of this is going to be significantly worse. And it's going to be there every time they go into the grocery store, every time they stop to tank up their vehicle. It's, I remember saying a couple weeks ago, I don't know how these people are going to go out into public after some of the votes they've taken so blatantly in opposition to the best interest of their constituents, who they were sent there to represent. So we'll
No
see. We'll
question.
see. I'm happy to hear it's playing out that way, because frankly, that's what their votes deserve.
Well, Danielle, I'll give you an example. When I was going through last night, just making sure that all of these people knew who the Republicans were who killed these very good CCS bills in committee. I went through the list: Reiser, Domain, Kerner, Jacob Landry, Orgeron,
Z.
Jason DeWitt, Z. Zarang, Jacob Bro, going through those list of Republicans. Guess what? The vast majority of these people knew that because we have been talking about those names and
Wow.
mentioning those names already. And I just want to make sure that y'all remember these names, because the reason why you're sitting here right now with Exxon Mobil breathing down your throat here in Allen Parish is because our Republican dominated House Natural Resources Committee failed to do its job for you in the session. That's why this is happening right now. So we
Well, let's get
intend,
into that,
yeah,
Chris.
let's get into
Would
it.
you? Because the carbon capture issue is kind of the big one that's rearing its head, and you have said it in no uncertain terms that the legislature really not missed its opportunity, chose deliberately against the opportunity to protect localities from private encroachment from these big companies. And now we're seeing it play out in real time. Would you just give us an update on what's happening in Allen Parish and how that didn't have to happen?
Sure. And just a reminder, a little background here, Danielle. House Bill 4, you recall, by Chuck Owen,
Yeah.
very important bill. The first CCS bill called in the session before House Natural Resources. Representative Owen did a fabulous job explaining the bill, explaining why, under principles of federalism, it's so important that every local government in Louisiana be vested with the authority to make this decision about whether or not to allow permitting of carbon capture sequestration in their parish. It was a great bill. The bill was killed, as we have repeatedly said, by the Republicans that I just named in House Natural
Yep.
Resources Committee. So then, as a default position, Representative Owen and two other reps brought three additional bills that would simply have allowed the local jurisdictions of the parishes that they themselves represent to make the decision, just make exceptions for their parishes. Those bills were also defeated by Rhino Republicans in committee.
And that committee, that was the municipalities committee,
That
my
was the
favorite one.
Parochial and Municipal Affairs
Yeah.
Committee. Yes. And anyway, what happened? So there was no protection passed in the legislature conferring authority on local jurisdictions to make these decisions. So nonetheless, Allen Parish, in really what is an admirable and heroic effort to protect their local community, they passed their own ordinance in Allen Parish, giving Allen Parish the authority to regulate the permitting process for carbon capture sequestration in their parish. ExxonMobil wants to come in there. They want to lay the pipelines. They want to do the injection wells. And Allen Parish is saying, we just passed an ordinance. You can't do it. So ExxonMobil filed a lawsuit a few days ago against Allen Parish, saying that state law provides that carbon capture sequestration can be done and that the Secretary of Conservation can issue permits. This ordinance is preempted by state law, and therefore you can't do it. And you know what, Danielle? Sadly enough, they're right, because there is current law. My point is that the legislature had the chance to confer this authority on local governments, and they failed to do so. And these 150 people, 200 people, whoever who showed up in Allen Parish last night are heartbroken and angry about that.
Yeah.
And they understand that the responsibility for the fact that ExxonMobil is now bullying them to come into their parish and give them something that they do not want, fault and culpability for that lays directly at the feet of the House Natural Resources Committee in the legislature and our governor. Because do not think for one second that if our governor wanted this bill to pass, it would have passed, it would have gone to his desk, and he would have signed it.
That's right.
I want anybody laboring under the illusion that the vast majority of bills that the governor wants to at least get to votes on the floor get there and they get voted on. These bills have the ignominious distinction of not even surviving a committee vote. And because of these rhino Republicans. So, right now, Allen Parish is in the untenable position of having to rescind a local ordinance that was enacted simply to protect themselves and their landowners from this fraud, from this racket, from this encroachment. And now they have to rescind it because our legislature failed to act. And under state law, current state law preempts that ordinance. And it's correct. It is correct, but it is reprehensibly sad.
Yeah. And Chris, just on that, I'd like to put all of the legislators who were in the House Natural Resources Committee and voted against these bills, and the House Municipal and Parochial Affairs Committee who voted against these bills on notice. The fate of the representatives who reside in Allen Parish that did not support this legislation is the same fate that is knocking at your door. You can expect your constituents to be just as angry, just as incensed, and just as informed as those ones. Because look, down here in Terrebonne, am I under any illusions that there's not carbon capture coming down this way? Are you kidding me? With the way that our delegation voted every single time to kill these bills? I don't think so. But let me tell you one other thing. Remember what Carla Lims told us, the state rep from, where's she from? South Dakota.
South Dakota.
She told us 13 reps were voted out
14.
of 14 reps were voted out of office in South Dakota for on these very issues. So I hope that the sound of Jaws, the theme song of Jaws, is coming for every single one of these representatives. I happen to be a strong believer and a very I found a new thing to be upset about. The fact that we have 4-year terms in the state of Louisiana for state reps is also disgusting, and I think just absolutely wrong, Chris. We should have 2-year terms. Why do we have to deal with these reps 1 minute longer than we have to deal with our congressional reps who should be beholden to far more people than the state reps, right? Like Clay Higgins, Steve Scalise, those guys. They get 2-year terms. They have to live in a constant election cycle. I want the state reps of Louisiana to have to live in a constant state of election cycle so that they have to answer for what they've done. Because having this sophomore year nonsense where they think they can act any way they want and get away with it, they're not going to get away with it. But why should we have to live with them for 2 more years?
Yeah. And as you've said before, Danielle, they're going to be reminded, even if they start coming around for political purposes next year, we're going to be reminding them of what they did when they thought they could do it virtually undercover, when nobody would remember. But let me tell you what we are going to remember, and everybody's going to remember. I want to say one other point about this lawsuit against Allen Parish. The the attorney that advises the Allen Parish police jury, the one that got sued by ExxonMobil, said that he had asked a number of times for an advisory opinion from the Attorney General, from Liz Muriel, in order to clarify whether or not there were grounds to fight for their local ordinance there. And there may be constitutional grounds to do so under principles of federalism. But there was never any opinion forthcoming. And then, for a period of time, even before the suit was filed. And then once the suit was filed against Allen Parish, the position of the Attorney General was that it's our policy that we don't issue advisory opinions on any matter that is either the subject of current litigation or anticipated to lead to litigation. And so that is what they're hanging their hat on for their failure to issue an advisory opinion that may have helped the Allen Parish police jury in its fight, and at a minimum could have clarified whether or not they should just rescind it entirely.
Chris, Liz Murrill was one of the few members of our executive team that I have not lived in a constant state of disappointment with. She's done some good things. There's been some moments that I've been maybe on the other side of an issue with her. She's had to support the Secretary of State at the Supreme Court on things that I just think, that indefensible in my perspective, although it may have been her job to do it, right? But that to me it leaves a sour taste in my mouth, what you just said about that situation.
Yeah. And, I think that I don't understand the policy, and maybe it could be clarified, the policy that the Attorney General's office does not issue any kind of advisory opinion to clarify an issue of law if it could lead, if the matter may end up in litigation or is in current litigation. It seems like when there is a dispute about an interpretation of law or an important issue of law, that seems like that should be precisely the time when the Attorney General would weigh in order to clarify and make sure that people are interpreting the law in a way that is proper. So I don't quite understand the policy. It seems counterintuitive to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me, and if it doesn't make sense to you, the attorney in the room, then look, I defer to you on that, but it doesn't make sense
Yeah.
to me on its face.
But I'll tell you, Danielle, I just want to tell you that this is last night there, These people are engaged. They're not happy. And you know what? It's really axiomatic that, people generally are pretty laid back, pretty affable, pretty acceptable and accepting and understanding, except when you start messing with their family or you start messing with their property. Those things will bring the claws out on people, and these people are deeply concerned about this encroachment on their core foundational rights of private property. And not just them, Danielle, but people across the state are becoming increasingly concerned about this. And as I said a few minutes ago, Governor Landry's complete silence on these issues, I don't believe is boding well for him.
No, it's not.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
And, you said people get incensed if you mess with their families, you mess with their property. Another thing they get incensed with is if you mess with their ability to voice their free speech, whether that's through their words or through their vote. And Secretary of State Nancy Landry, we were looking at her website getting ready for the show today. And her website, the Secretary of State's website reads like a propaganda machine, straight up. It's all lauding everything she's done to secure our elections. Meanwhile, we saw her run roughshod over the legislature this session in a way, full LBJ style, Chris. I don't know why she's able to run so much, why she's so powerful over there. We have our own suspicions. She does run the elections. There's that. And we know that she was a member of the legislature before. So perhaps she's just got really excellent rapport with these folks. And perhaps the legislators just are void of all intellectual curiosity and believe everything she says about the election system versus what their constituents are telling them. I don't really know what the reason is for her tremendous amount of unchecked power at the state legislature, but she is moving forward full steam ahead. Could you give us an update on what she has done to date? And also, we're hearing things at the federal level that don't bode well for the actions that she seems to be taking.
Yeah, she's in the process right now of going forward. I know that there are some test certification events that have been scheduled where citizens and vendors can go and show their wares and certify things. I want to remind the listeners once again that we're going to hold her accountable when she says, as she did in committee, that she's not going to be buying any component parts of any voting machine from a foreign country, that no voting system is going to be coming from a foreign country, that she will continue to be subjected to legislative oversight. She said that directly to Blake Miguez. There are not going to be any of these barcodes on the systems. She has committed to that on the record. So we have to make sure that we hold her to that. What you said, Danielle, about the feds, you mentioned earlier that President Trump had said, we weren't able to locate specifically where he said it, but he said that right after this big, beautiful bill, right after he signs it, his focus will be on election security. And I have a feeling that will involve the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses of these computer-based voting systems. I believe,
Yeah.
and I believe that's a huge part of the reason why Nancy Landry has really put it into high gear, driving 150 miles an hour to try to get to the finish line on this. Because as we've said before, if Trump comes out and puts the quietus on this, she's going to be in a very difficult position.
Yeah. And as recently as yesterday, DNI, Tulsi Gabbard made a statement saying that there's a new group within the Office of the DNI that's going to be taking a look at this stuff, specifically the 2020 and 2022 elections, to see if there was any interference by the intelligence community or if there was any or if there was any political maneuvering that shifted the elections in some way, in a behind the scenes. So I don't expect that she's sitting on her hands over there.
No, I don't either. It reminds me, Danielle, President Trump has said before that not only are these machines not trustworthy, he knows that one of the ways that the 2020 election was stolen was in the machines, was in the computers. He knows that. And these computers that assisted in the steal all have what's called a paper component. Louisiana is the only state in the country that simply currently has no paper component. There's no way to even pretend to audit an election in the state of Louisiana because there is no paper right now. But the machines that helped steal the election in 2020 all did have paper components. So I have a hard time believing that President Trump would have endorsed, or his administration would have endorsed, as she says, would have endorsed Nancy Landry's rush to purchase computer-based voting systems just because they have a paper component that's spit out by a machine. I don't believe that that is true. And I think that she's not being forthright with the citizens of Louisiana with regard to what really is Tulsi Gabbard's position on the vulnerability of these electronic voting systems.
Yeah. And Chris, you mentioned that not only is Trump coming with his team to look at elections, and I think some big statements and probably new executive orders are going to be coming down the pike. But you mentioned that the smart people, the smart crooks, are starting to go ahead and say, let me get on the right side of this issue.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Randy Russ, a close friend of LeCag's and the State of Freedoms, put on our Signal group about a 15-20 second recent clip from Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson.
One
You
of the
recall,
biggest crooks out there.
one of the biggest crooks out there, and someone who is as deeply in bed, or has been, with Dominion voting systems as it's possible to be. She's
Yeah.
been one of their biggest defenders. Yet recently, she comes out and talks about the as yet unresolved issues with Dominion voting systems. And I think I can play this. It's about 15 or 20 seconds. I'm just going to see if I can play it from the phone here. But this is Jocelyn Benson, and people who follow election security are going to be going, "What?" Listen.
Oh, you're going to have to turn it up, Chris.
With many members of the community, work through those ideas to help also communicate why voting machines by Dominion that have been found to be problematic have continued to be unaddressed for several years, again, that preceded my time in office.
Of course that preceded my time in office. She made very clear of that, right? But Jocelyn Benson, I mean, it's stunning that someone like that, which really was, if you look up 2020 election fraud and 2020 number one defender of Dominion voting systems, her picture would appear right next to it. And yet this lady right now is coming full circle and talking about all the problems with Dominion voting systems. And I think that that is a harbinger of things to come,
Yeah,
in the future. I think that
it
she
is.
knows, Danielle, as others know, that President Trump has the goods, and they're trying to get out in front of this, or maybe avoid the onrushing freight train that's headed their way.
And you know what, Chris? I think you made me think of something that I think is pretty interesting. Jocelyn Benson has every reason to be afraid, right? She's in a swing state. It's a state where we know the election was stolen. There are many people who are involved in election integrity that have figured out that Michigan was definitely stolen. There's no two ways about it. Louisiana's not in that position. Louisiana's never been a swing state, or at least not in many years. Louisiana is not necessarily under the microscope when it comes to election integrity. However, I think if there's going to be election fraud uncovered, I don't think it's just going to go to select areas, because if this is something that has affected the entire nation. So my hope is that Secretary of State Nancy Landry would wake up to the fact that she is not immune from this uh, uh, spotlight. She's not immune from the microscope that's coming her way. And I'm sure 2020, that was Kyle Ardwan. That was also Nancy Landry. So I just think it's interesting. The people who see the writing on the wall are obviously the ones who stand serious criminal fines or worse, as the sound of Tulsi Gabbard's voice draws nearer and nearer to them. But I don't think the people in these places, in these seats of power in Louisiana can breathe a sigh of relief and feel like they can move on with life. I think they have every reason and should be doing the right thing to make sure that their house is in order, because I don't think they're going to avoid inspection.
I don't think they're going to avoid inspection either, insofar as the fraud in the voting system, or with respect to the effort of her office. Well, she wasn't the Secretary of State at the time, but she was very, very top of Kyle Ardoin's office. When provably they tried to suppress speech regarding elections that they disagreed with. I mean, and clearly they were doing it. They were reporting citizens to the federal government in an effort to censor that speech. That is absolutely unconstitutional, and it is illegal for any public official to engage in any effort to police speech. It's not their job. In
That's
fact,
right.
it's absolutely contrary to their job. They're prohibited from doing it. And so that occurred. And
Don't
even
forget about the voter rolls.
and the voter rolls, 500, 600,000 people on our voter rolls, by many estimations, including Dr. Russ's, that have still not been cleaned off our rolls. And so, just specifically with regard to the vulnerabilities of the computers, look, if cheating actually occurred in Michigan in the machines, if cheating actually occurred in Arizona and in other places, there's no question that it could occur here, even if it hasn't occurred yet. So, I've always made the analogy that, just because your house has not been broken into yet and your goods ransacked and your home pillaged, does not mean that you leave your front door unlocked for someone to come and do that. So if the computers are vulnerable to manipulation and hacking, to me it's almost irrelevant whether or not it has actually occurred, and it may well have occurred, but here in Louisiana I'm talking about. The point is, I mean, we have a reason to be hopeful and optimistic that President Trump will make an announcement based on these EO findings, that there is not a computer-based voting system in the world that is safe and that is reliable, and that we have to go to an all secure hand marked paper ballot system as well. We should. And he said it and mentioned it many times before. And I'm certainly hoping that that's what will occur.
Yeah. Well, and if people think back to, the time before 2020, if you think about election fraud, if you think about dirty elections, Louisiana was always considered top of the list. We were right up there with the Windy City of Chicago in terms of, you know, being able to manipulate elections. So let's not kid ourselves and pretend like that's not part of our history. I think that politicians in Louisiana have been savvy enough to steal elections for more than decades. So I'm not going to move
And
off
we'll
of that
steal them,
mountain.
and we'll steal them anyway.
Yeah, come on. Okay, so we'll be keeping an eye on this, but I think this is an important issue we're not letting go of. This is the central issue as far as you see it, Chris, as far as I see it. If we can't fix our elections, we can't keep our property, we can't keep our free speech, we can't do anything. So we have to get these elections fixed. And one of my number one priorities as soon as the elections are fixed is right now we should be recruiting candidates. If any of the legislators in your area have not measured up this session, you need to start recruiting a candidate or strongly consider becoming the candidate.
No
We
question
can't say it
about it.
often enough. We can't say it loud enough. Chris, your constant drumbeat, what JFK said, we will get the government that we demand and we deserve. So if and until people stand up and are willing to do the hard thing, which is, I mean, I'm not saying being part of a legislature is not a hard thing. It absolutely is. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of time away from your family. It's listening to a lot of complaining people and competing interests. So you have to have a tough skin, and you have to have a thick backbone to be able to do this and not buckle under pressure. But we need good men and women to stand up and do it. And we need people. And my other point on this is we have to move to 2-year cycles for our state reps. We absolutely have to. This is one of the biggest measures of accountability that exists in our country. After the election is to be able to have the election, and we can't wait every 4 years to have an election for these state reps.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think it gives them too much time to go in and become corrupted. It's unfortunate because it seems inevitable in many cases that they do become corrupted, and they become different people. And so the longer they're there, the greater the likelihood that they become corrupted and compromised. And I can't think of any reason either, Danielle, why they should not be serving 2-year terms and sort of routinely being going back before the people and having to defend what they've done before the people. I think that's an excellent point. I want to make one other point here about Jocelyn Benson. There is no way that Jocelyn Benson is simply volunteering this information about Dominion voting systems because she had an ethical or a moral epiphany one morning. The reason why she is doing this and saying this, in my view, is that someone is quote unquote communicating with her and in a way that suggests that they know exactly what is occurring, what has gone on, and that she's not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. That is what I find to be the most encouraging sign. Her statements suggest to me that the Trump administration is fully aware of the corruption in these voting systems. And that's what my takeaway is from this.
Yeah. And, the other thing I wanted to mention, not that I have a great detail on it, but Dominion's not the only one that's under fire. And I don't know what Secretary of State Landry's preferred machine system is, if it's, I don't know, Smartmatic or SNS, Dominion, but they all have been found to be extremely flawed. And not just that they've been found to be extremely flawed, but they're under fire, they're under legal fire. Like in the last couple of weeks, things have been coming out about it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember any of them. I just don't have the details close to hand, but I have recollection that specifically ESNS, some things have come out about recently.
I think you're right. And, the great cybersecurity experts, Danielle, they don't make any distinction between the manufacturer of these computer-based voting systems. They don't say that, okay, this computer generated system is safe, this one's not. Their belief is that they are uniformly unsafe. And that's what we have to keep in mind. It's a great point you make that it's not just Dominion we're talking about. It is any electronic voting system. And Alex Halderman has made that very clear, along with multiple other cyber experts.
Maybe, Chris, I'll just switch to one other topic I do want us to get into the LACAG scorecard, because I know it's pretty close to being completed. But before we get into that, I'd love it if you would just talk for a minute. Sparks have been flying recently between Governor Landry and Senator Alan Seabaugh on Governor Landry's, insurance reform package, if we want to call it that. Would you kind of tell us, just give us the rewind on what all went down between the two of those guys?
Sure. Governor Landry was pushing a bill as part of his insurance reform package that was ostensibly supposed to curb lawyer advertising. This obnoxious advertising that you see, where the guy comes on the commercial and talks about how much money this lawyer won for him, and go see him if you get in a wreck because he got me all this money, this that, and that. It's just dastardly. It's unsavory, but it happens all the time. I mean, the channel media is just flooded with this stuff. Governor Landry, had a bill that was sponsored by, I believe, Representative Carver, that supposedly was going to curb the lawyer advertising and contribute to the cleansing of the culture of constant litigation. That's what it was going to do. If people are not always seeing these ads, then they'll be less inclined to go see a lawyer every time they get in an offender bender. Bottom line is, first of all, the bill would do nothing really to curb lawyer advertising. Nothing. It just cut around the edges. So the bill itself was largely ineffectual. But the issue with Senator Seabaugh and Governor Landry is that Senator Seabaugh was not in the committee when the bill was voted on. He was in a jury trial in Shreveport. He couldn't be there. Landry's bill, failed 3-1 in committee. So Seabaugh's presence there really wouldn't have made a difference. It would have made it 3-2, but it still would have lost. Seabaugh couldn't be there. So Governor Landry, which is in typical Landry fashion, trying to peremptorily place blame on others for his anticipated failures coming down the pike, started criticizing Senator Seabaugh, saying we had a chance to get this bill passed. We had a chance to get it done, to do something about all this horrible lawyer advertising. Senator Seabaugh couldn't show up for work. He couldn't show up for work. Well, Senator Seabaugh responded publicly and said, first of all, I was in a jury trial that I couldn't move. Secondly, the vote was 3-1. My presence wouldn't have mattered even if I'd been there. And thirdly, Governor Landry, until you stop taking all expense paid trips with billboard trial lawyers on their private planes to go on hunting trips with them, insurance rates for ordinary Louisiana citizens will continue to be outrageous in our state. And so Senator Seabaugh, it was a shot directly across the Landry bow. And Seabaugh deserves, I think, some credit for being the only representative that I'm aware of, or senator, who has directly responded and confronted Governor Landry on some of this hypocrisy. So I think Senator Seabaugh deserves credit for that. I happen to believe that what he said is true.
Yeah.
The broader theme here, Danielle, is that just as in the case of Commissioner Temple, Governor Landry trying to shift all the blame over to Commissioner Temple, when that explodes, he's going to be able to say that this insurance rates are not going down partially because we were unable to get our advertising bill passed, and that was because of Senator Seabaugh. So he plays, again, he likes to blame other people when his own policy priorities fail.
Well, they would fail whether they passed or failed, right? I mean, that was your point, but
Well,
it's
exactly. But he will be able to say,
yeah.
see, nobody will ever be able to know because the bill didn't pass. So nobody will ever be able to know whether it would have done any good. And he'll be able to plausibly argue that it would have done good if it had passed, but because of Seabaugh, it couldn't get passed.
Wow.
And so
That's a lot of gaslighting, huh?
a lot of gaslighting going on there. So I think, but that's basically what's going on there. But let me tell you what, if there's one thing about Alan Seabaugh, he absolutely does not mind saying how the cow ate the cabbage.
Yeah, he doesn't, and I would have been more shocked if he would have just sit back and taken the punch without fighting back. He doesn't strike me as a man to just let
No.
somebody land a punch and not put up a fight.
Now, but, he's very different temperamentally from Blake Miguez, who is also a strong man and a very good legislator. But Senator Miguez is someone who really did kind of allow Landry to have his rant and did not respond, the way that Senator Seabaugh had.
Well, he still has time. You can always
I'm sure
later.
they'll.
The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing around the world with the Slenderize drops. These homeopathic drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, help balance the body's pH, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. I've heard firsthand testimonials from droppers in their 20s to droppers in their 80s who say that the Slenderize drops have completely revolutionized their lives. Try the drops today to see the results for yourself. To learn more about the Slenderize drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at info@freedomstate.us and put drops in the subject line, or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. We also have links to those in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the state of freedom.
The ample opportunities.
Well, look, Chris, you have been spending a lot of time poring over the votes, poring over the legislation that we followed extremely closely, and you followed it much closer than I did. LCAG has its scorecard together. It's on lcag.org under the Action Center. If you're looking at it on a computer, it's on the right-hand side. If you're looking at it on your phone, I think you have to scroll all the way to the end of the Action Center. Why don't you give us some highlights and some lowlights? Who are the winners and who are the people who are going home and finding that they're going to have to send somebody else to the store to get groceries for them because they can't make it out in public?
Well, I'll tell you some of the Some of the good ones, Chuck Owen ended up with a great, very good score. Beryl Amade ended up with a very good score. I'll tell you someone who ended up kind of a dark horse who doesn't really talk a lot in the legislature, but ended up doing quite well. And I became increasingly impressed with him as the session went on, was Peter Egan.
Okay.
I thought he did very well and voted the right way on most all the issues. Kelly Hennessy Dickerson was solid pretty much across the board. The only 100, Danielle, the only 100% was Kathy Edmiston
Wow.
in the state legislature. The only
Well, she
one.
is excellent. She is excellent.
She is absolutely excellent. Gabe Ferment did well. I don't know if I mentioned Rodney Shamerhorn. He was very, very good, and a number of others. But there were some in there, including, and I want people to go look at the scorecard, because I just want people to know, Danielle, that we don't give anything away. And our scorecard is based upon our evaluation of 35 to 40 critically important bills to sovereignty, to personal freedom, the CCS bills. We don't just go in there and evaluate them on every single bill.
Yeah.
And we also,
Yeah.
one of the things that we consider is whether or not it took some courage, some backbone to make a vote. You get weighted in your favor for doing that. We don't really give a whole lot of credit, with few exceptions, on bills that were important, but that were not controversial, that it didn't require really any backbone to vote on. So Gabe Ferment ended up doing quite well. My rep, Dixon McMakin, right here, my personal rep, he ended up with a C or a D because of some of the things that he did during this session. My personal rep, and there were others in that category, quite a
My
few
rep.
others in that category. And there were a couple of Democrats, Danielle, who were, Jessica Domain, eminent domain. She just, I don't remember quite frankly whether she was a D or an F, but she was
It was
very,
in the
very low.
40s.
She was in the 40s. Yes. Okay. So she was an F. She got an F. Joseph Orgeron was way down there. There were Democrats in our scorecard, Danielle, who actually scored higher than some of these Republicans. And
We
but I look.
predicted that, didn't we?
We absolutely did. We absolutely predicted it. So I want everybody to go look at the scorecards. We just want you to know that they were calculated based on the numbers, where we thought the weight should be, based on their adherence to constitutional principles and how they voted, and on whether or not they were looking out on critically important things for your interests consistently. And we tried to give credit where credit was due, but we had to where that was appropriate also. And it is what it is. If you go over to the Senate side, Danielle, we had some very good ones. As you might imagine, Blake Miguez did quite well. Valerie Hodges scored very well, and there were several others who did well. But there were a lot of senators who did very poorly.
How did
Also,
Senator Comrade Miller do, Chris?
Comrade Miller was among the lowest of anybody in the Senate or in the House. I know he was an F.
Wow.
And well deserved.
Yeah, it was well deserved. Maybe I'll just mention as well that people get points on or points off for their authorship of bills. If they were carrying or associated with a fantastic and an important bill or a controversial bill that would have been a good thing for the people, they got points weighted for that. If you were carrying, authoring, or associated with as a co-author of a bill that was going to steal freedom from people, that was going to take our state in the wrong direction, you got points off for that. Likewise, committees. If you were in a committee that took a vote and it killed the bill, well, obviously there's no House floor vote, there's no Senate floor vote if those bills got killed in committee, but the people in the committee bear the brunt of the way that they voted. So some people have more votes really than other people that are accounted for, but they earn their scores fair
They
and
earned their
square.
score. Joshua Carlson, he ended up with a B. 84. He did some good things, voted the right way most of the time. Raymond Cruz was a 91, probably not a surprise on things. Paula Davis, who's also from right here in Baton Rouge, ended up with a 51. She beat Jessica Domain, eminent domain, by 4 points. Peter Egan, like I said, ended up with an 86. I think it's Jay Galley, 87. I think that these are all very fair, but Danielle, we're not giving anything away, and you got what you earned. Jacob Landry, the one that I felt pretty bad about Jacob Landry because he brought a very good grid bill for which we gave him credit, as you know, and talked about it and applauded him for that. He also went back and switched his vote on HB 601, a CCS bill, the second time. We gave him credit for that. But because of his efforts and participation in killing so many of those CCS bills, the first time they came up and never came up again, he ended up with a 70, with a C. If he hadn't had if he didn't have the burden of those CCS bills on him, he would have ended up in the A range. His vote on those bills hurt him very badly, but he ended up with a 70. A C. Danny McCormick, the one and only, ends up with a 95. He had one bad vote on something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he ended up well. Chuck Owen ended up well, 93. Philip Tarver ended up with a 92. And let's see.
How did Chance Henry do, Chris? We
How
talked
did
about him in a pretty positive light this session.
Let's see. Chance Henry ended up with a 5 because he voted the wrong way on 5 or 6 very, very important bills. We did give him credit for bringing the ICE bill, a lot of credit for bringing the bill requiring reporting to ICE. But it's just, he voted wrong on the cell phone bill. He voted wrong on the election bills, and it's just one of those things that it is what it is. Brett Guyman ends up with a 93. He did well. So we gave credit where it was due. We're not afraid to give an A, but we're not afraid to give an F either.
That's right, and we don't grade on a curve, huh?
And we do not grade on a curve. A couple points, more points. Robert Elaine ended up with an 81. He ended up with a B. He voted the right way on some important things, and
for the down the bayou folks, that's Alain.
Alain. Yeah, exactly. Valerie Hodges with a 95. Jay Morris ended up with a 68. Alan Seabaugh ended up with an 85, solid B.
Yep, he could have done better if he got the election stuff right.
Yes, and of course, Cameron Henry, the president of the Senate, who is responsible either singularly or collectively with Jeff Landry for the killing of 3 critically important bills.
And probably more that we don't know about.
And probably more that we don't know, and also trying to latch an amendment onto HB 592 to walk Bill Cassidy back into the Senate. Deplorably so, ends up with a 53.
How did Speaker de Villiers do? Because he really insisted on voting against those carbon capture bills when he didn't have to.
Yeah, de Villiers is let's see where de Villiers ends up. De Villiers ended up with a 70. C. And the reason why he ended up with a 70, talked to Katie about this, is because we gave him significant credit for making sure, unlike Clay Schexnayder, who just allowed good bills to die on the House floor, Philip de Villiers did one very good thing. He made sure that bills were called and voted on and sent to the Senate in a timely manner. And I think that is very important, and I think that he deserves credit for that.
Awesome.
So I don't put him in the same category with Cameron Henry, and so I think a 70 for de Villiers is how he came out because of the credit that we gave him for making sure those bills were called.
Well, Chris, thank you again for doing the work on that and for crunching the numbers to make sure that we are able to get a fair accounting for this session. I think it's really important that people go to the LCAG website, check out where your legislators ranked. How did they do? You can drill down by vote and see what it was they did right or what it was they did wrong on which bill. And it's just going to be really important leading into next year. Of course, we know that we still have 2 more years with these legislators, whether we like them or not, unless something about fixing our election systems happens, and maybe we'll just throw out the whole lot of them. That would be my dream, and just start from scratch. But I don't know if that's going to happen. It could happen in my dream world. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, hope springs eternal, Danielle. Hope springs eternal.
That's right.
And so make sure all you have to do is go to lacag.org and then go to Action Center, and then where it says View Scorecard, and then click on that, and it will come up, and you can see where your representative or your senator ranks on really what is the most conservative scorecard in the state by probably the most conservative advocacy group in the state. So if you're a real constitutional conservative, this scorecard will be of real value to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be a great help as you look to determine who needs to be primaried.
Who needs to be primaried? Absolutely. And who needs to be able to return
Yeah.
to the legislature? There you go.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I just want to mention that we have been named, you've mentioned this before, but in the last couple of weeks, the State of Freedom, because of your listenership, because of your support, has been named the #1 conservative political podcast in the state. We're so proud. We're so humbled by that. And we want to let you know that we are now pursuing sponsorships from like-minded businesses because we believe that we have something great to offer. We have a great venue, we have a great listenership, a great reach, and now we're partnered with, like I said, the Voice of the People USA Radio and TV network, which is making big moves, and we're so excited and just thrilled to be partners with them in their new endeavor. Like I said, more details on that to come. But if you have an interest in sponsoring the State of Freedom, please do so. Please send me a note, Danielle at freedomstate.us. Reach out to us. Let us know what would be interesting to you, what would be helpful to your business. We have packages available for pretty much any budget, so we can help make event announcements as well if that's something that's interesting to people. We can help promote your nonprofit or your church if there are big events coming up. So just keep us in mind as a venue for advertising what you have going on.
If you want your business to grow, if you love your country and you want to partner with a patriotic group, then let us sell your product. Let us advertise for you and watch your business grow. Watch your business grow, because if Danielle and I believe in a product, truly believe in it, which we will do if we're going to be helping you to advertise it, it will help you. It will help sell your product. There's no question about it, because when we believe in something, we're like a dog on a bone. We go after it. We don't quit, and we are absolutely relentless. So I don't care whether I'm talking about the best hamburger joint in town, or the best place to go get your vehicle fixed, or the best hairstylist in Baton Rouge or in Louisiana. I'm going to go down there, check it out, and I'm going to be able to say, guess what? I ate that burger. I got my car fixed there. Oh, you might not be able to tell right now, but I got my hair cut there. And guess what? We can believe in it and encourage you to go and patronize those businesses. But we're excited about this opportunity to be able to partner with like-minded people and to help them grow their businesses and really ultimately help them to achieve the dreams that they have.
Yeah. Absolutely. And don't forget to go to lacag.org as well. And if you are not yet a member of LACAG, you're going to want to join. You know how much work LACAG did this session. You know the relentless and very fervent work of Chris and Katie. It's absolutely imperative to support LACAG, support the work, and continue the drumbeat of freedom in the state.
Yeah, because it's really David and Goliath, but David is getting stronger. David is getting stronger every day, and we are leveling the balance, leveling the playing field against a lot of corrupt special interest groups, Danielle. We don't take any donations, don't accept any support from any special interest groups. It's only ordinary Louisiana citizens across the state. $22 a month, $15 a month, $50, whatever it is that you're able to do comfortably on a regular basis. Every dime helps because it's coming from citizens across Louisiana, and we are going to clean that legislature out. We're going to continue to hold them accountable for what they do and don't do. There is a new sheriff in town, and all of the potential criminals are aware that we're here.
Yeah, and Chris, but just before we go, I want to give a shout out to John in the chat. John, I got to meet John a couple weeks ago. Good to see you here, John. Thanks for joining us. He asks, how can we break through this echo chamber for election systems that many of these guys that they live in? And the answer to that is I'm not exactly sure, except one thing you know for sure is that if you talk to your state rep about it, if you talk to your state senator about it, and they act like you are crazy, they act like you don't know what you're talking about, that means they have disdain for the voice of the people that they are supposed to represent. So at some point, we just know where they stand. But this is the $50 million question, the $500 million question. How do we break through that echo chamber? I don't know, other than keeping up the drumbeat, continually hammering them on social media, especially with posts like we've been trying to do with regard to what the president and his team, who have the full backing and mandate of the American public, are saying about these issues. Do you have
Yeah.
any ideas, Chris?
Well, I'm to the point now, Danielle, where I believe they are so invested. The people that John's talking about are so invested in a certain narrative that we have the safest voting system. Our voting system is safe and secure. You know, the Nancy Landry narrative,
Yeah.
that it's very difficult psychologically to pull away from that and to admit that you were wrong and to move in a different direction. There's great resistance both institutionally and individually to change, even when you know or certainly should know that the position that you've held and the narrative that you've been pushing is simply not right. At that point, many people simply double down even more because they don't want to, they become even more intractable because they don't want to admit that they've been wrong. So at that point, the only thing we can do is continue to educate the public and continue to try to hold them accountable for these officials accountable for doing the wrong thing. But I think the key is, as you said, Danielle, continue to educate on social media, continue to educate on our podcast and through LeCag. I can't wait when David Clements comes back on. I'm sure he'll have some other important news about election integrity. But at this point, Danielle, it is not a matter of the people who are on the other side of this issue, the ones John talked about, the echo chamber. They are not over there because they have a sincere belief anymore that they are right. They are over there because they simply refuse to acknowledge the truth at this point, because the evidence is there, the information is out there, it's everywhere. They simply do not want to acknowledge it. And if that's the case, then they're going to be people they're not going to go quietly into that dark night. I promise you, they're going to have to be beaten, not persuaded at this point.
That's right. And a couple ways you can take action, because you know we love action on the State of Freedom. Chris, does LeCag still have a call to action up on the Action Center about stopping the purchase of the machines going to
We have a
Nancy
call to
Landry?
action up. I'm not sure if it's active, but I will reactivate that as soon as the show's over here today. Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, We the People Bayou community, if you go to our website, which is WTPbayou.org, and go to that Take Action button, you can send an email to Governor Landry and to Secretary of State Landry saying that the purchase of these machines is not based in reality and they need to move to a different idea. We the People Bayou community is doing a letter writing campaign. We have the letters and we are providing the stamps. And all we're asking is for people who are in agreement with our position to sign them and to, put their return address on the envelope. So if you are interested, you're in the Terrebonne Lafourche area, St. Mary area, keep an eye out on We the People Bayou community's social media. We have some opportunities to get involved with that coming up. And I think we will just be continuing the push, Chris. I think there are other ways that LeCag will be promoting this idea that the machine purchases have to be stopped. We will also, I think, be seeking President Trump's intervention because
No question.
we believe that, obviously if he comes down to Louisiana or directs something from the White House that could stop the purchase of these machines, that would go a long, long, long way.
My understanding, Danielle, is that is presently being done, that there is a channel of communication with President Trump as we speak, and that he is really not being fooled by any of this. And I think he is way too smart not to understand what's going on here. And I think I think he has an eye on all of it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that rounds us out for today. Join us again on Thursday if you would. Just a reminder, we're live every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Time on pretty much, the main platforms where we're live on Rumble, YouTube, and X. and also Facebook. And I think you can catch us on the LaCag Facebook page as well. We go live in both places, State of Freedom and LaCag Facebooks. So please join us on Thursday. We will have Senator Valerie Hodges here to do kind of an after action report on some of the legislation that she tried to bring forward. Some she was successful with, some she was pretty surprised to see the resistance that she got. So
I
anyway,
cannot
we'll get a
wait to
great
talk to Senator Hodges about her experience in Comrade Miller's committee. I
Yeah.
can't wait.
Likewise. But thank you all again for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you on Thursday. God bless.
God bless y'all.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.